Hello everyone and welcome back to Coding Monk once again. In this video we are going to talk about how we can handle forms using React. So we are going to take up many examples. As you can see, I have already prepared these 6 examples for you, okay? And we are going to explore many things like how to validate each input, okay? How to submit the form, okay? And also how we are going to gracefully handle the errors, okay? So these are all the things that we are going to discuss in this video, okay? And the code for this video is already written, okay? And this is the repo that you are going to get after this video. So you can find the link for this in the description box, okay? And let me explain you how you can get started with this. When you will clone this repo, you will get these two folders, starter and completed code. You just have to navigate into the starter code, run npm I, then npm run start, okay? Then you can start following along with this video. Okay, enough with the introduction. Let's now actually start talking about how we are going to handle forms in React. So we are going to see a solution which is actually very optimized, okay, and it offers a lots of customization to us, okay. It has a very lightweight API, okay. So in this video we are going to talk about React Hook Form. React Hook Form is a very lightweight and flexible form library, okay. This is going to simplify form handling for us, okay, and it is going to offer us very performant forms, okay. So let's now talk about the reasons why we are going to make use of React Hook Form. Okay. So here are 3 big reasons why we are going to use React Hook Form. First one is it's very simple. That means the code that we are going to write is going to be very easy to understand. It's going to reduce a lot of boilerplate code, okay, which is required with other libraries, or if we handle the form manually using user state, okay. So that code will be reduced drastically. And then the second reason is it is very performant. That means it minimizes re-rendering, and you will be amazed by seeing that how optimized it is, okay. This is way much faster than other libraries that are there in the React ecosystem. And then the third, which is the most important reason why we are going to use this library, because it has very easy to implement validation logic, okay, and we can also create custom validators very easily, okay. So these are some of the reasons why we are going to use React Hook Form. So let's now actually start building, okay. So as I told you, just clone this repo, okay, and then navigate to starter code and run this commands npm install, then npm runs. After that you can start following along with me. So you can also visit React Hook Form official website, okay, and you can see a demo over here, okay, how this library is going to work, okay. And if you just scroll down on its home page, then you will be able to see what are its main features, okay. So this is actually very explanatory. You can get a very good example here with in the live demo itself, okay. So now we are going to dive into code and start implementing the logic by ourselves. So this is the starter repo which I have provided to you. Now here what we are going to do, first of all we are going to create a components folder inside source, okay. So I'm just going to create a new folder with the name of components. Here we'll be creating those 6 different components that I showed you in the preview, okay. Then I'm just going to create a new file here, okay. And the first thing that we are going to see is how we can create a simple, or you can say very basic form using React Hook Form. So I'll just call it register.js, okay, and you'll get the meaning behind its name sort. Then I'm just going to create a React functional component here. So I'm going to write export default function, okay, and then the name of the function I'm going to call it register. Then here we are just going to return some very simple JSX. Here I'm just going to write form, okay. You must have implemented this in HTML as well, okay. So this is our simple form tag, and inside it I'm just going to write 2 input tags, okay. So this is our first input tag which is going to be used for rendering first name, and then the second one is actually going to be a select component, okay. So this select is going to be from simple HTML, okay. So I'm just going to write it here like this, and then inside it I'm just going to provide few options. So the first option will be, we are actually going to ask the user their gender using this select, So I'm going to provide three options: female, male, and other. So I'm just going to basically save this component. Okay, let's also actually add a submit button here. So I'm just going to, you can use this input or button. Okay, then I'm just going to write here type is equal to submit. Okay, and let me also move it inside this form. Here I'll just correct submit like this. Okay, then we can again format and save this document. I'm also going to create an index.js file over here. Okay, so that I can export all of the different components from a single file. I can just write here export default. Okay, and then the name, I'm just going to call it register, and then from dot slash register like this. Okay, I'm just going to save it over here. Then inside app.js, I'm just going to render that register component that we just created in place of this content. Okay, so I will be writing register, and as you can see, it is auto suggesting me. Okay, now I have actually imported it over here, and let's actually see what we get on our. So now as you can see, we have got a very simple form with a simple text input, a select component, and a submit button. Okay, then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to again go inside this register component. Okay, then to give it some style, okay, I'm just going to use a very simple material UI component stack. Okay, so I'll just import it from material UI. Okay, then I'm going to put all of this input, select, and this input button and this submit button inside this stack. Let me also give it a spacing of 2. Okay, so we are just doing some very simple styling over here. Okay, so now as you can see, we have aligned our form vertically. Okay, all of these three things are now aligned properly. Then we are going to actually start adding some form logic inside. So here we are actually going to make use of a hook which is known as use form. Okay, and this use form is going to be imported from React form library. You just need to call it like this. Okay, and then from here we are going to get two things. Okay, we are going to destructure it out of this use form. So the first thing that we need here is register. Okay, and the second thing is handle submit. Now what we are going to actually do here is we are going to create a on submit function over here. Okay, and this on submit function is going to get data, okay, as a argument, and then we'll be just simply logging it to the console to see what data we are getting over here. Okay, you can also find explanatory comments that I have written in the completed code for you. Okay, then we just need to pass this on submit over here inside this form, and here we'll be first of all calling this handle submit. Okay, now what is the reasoning behind getting this handle submit and then calling it on this on submit? Okay, let me explain you. So what is going to happen when we click the submit button? Okay, then a on submit event is going to be fired inside this form. Okay, then that event will be catched by this handle submit. Okay, and this handle submit is actually going to run all the validations on this form. Okay, and if those validations are all returning true, that means all validations are passing, then this on submit which we are passing inside handle submit will be called. That means this function. Okay, so I hope I made this very clear that how this whole flow is going to work. First of all, we have to call this use hook form, okay, which is going to give us two things. First one is register. Okay, I'm going to explain use of register shortly, and the second thing is handle submit. Then we can create a on submit function which is going to get the data prop. Okay, and this data is actually going to be an object containing two things. First one, the value of this input field, and then the second thing is value of this select field. Okay, so we'll shortly see it in the console. Then we have to implement this on submit over here. This on submit is going to get this handle submit, which will be called when this submit button is pressed. Okay, this handle submit is going to internally do some validations on this form, If those validations succeed, then this on submit function will be called. That means we'll get this data and the data will be logged to the console. Okay, so now after making that clear, the last thing that we have to do here inside this form to make it working is to just register each field. Now there has to be some way in which we can link this input field and the select field to this use form hook. Okay, so that is going to be done through this register. Okay, now register is a function, okay, and we are going to call it. Okay, and inside this we have to just pass a name. Okay, so here I'm just going to call this field input as first name because we are going to ask the user for their first name inside this input field. Okay, similarly we are going to again do it in this select field as well. I'll be calling this register, okay, with some name for the select field, and the select field is actually going to get user's gender. Okay, so that is why I'm passing this gender over here. Then whatever result we get from calling this register function, we are destructuring it and passing those as prop to this input and select field. Now if you are curious, let me tell you what is going to happen, okay, after we destructure this register, okay, inside this input field. This input field is going to look like this: input, okay, and then here this there will be a on change function, okay, then there will be a on blur, okay, there will be a ref. So these are all the things that are going to be passed, okay, inside this input field as a result of destructuring this register, okay, over here. Now we can actually start submitting this form, okay, and then we'll start seeing the data in our console. Okay, so let's try it out. So here we have our form. Okay, now I'm going to write my name inside it. I'll just type Shreyans Shah, okay, or since this is first name, so let's just type Shreyans and gender male. Then if I click on submit button, then please pay attention to this console. Okay, you can see we have got this object which is containing two properties. First one is first name, which is Shreyans, gender is male. So that is how we have linked these two input fields, okay, with React hook form, okay, and we are able to get the data in our console. So I hope I made this point very clear how to register input fields. Okay, so that was the motive behind this register component. Okay, let's now actually move on to our next topic, and that is to validate our inputs. Okay, now I'm going to create another component here which is going to be called validation. So I'm just going to create a new component with the name of validation.js. Okay, similarly I'm going to create another functional component over here, and then I'll just call it validation, okay, like this. And then inside this validation again we are going to return some JSX. This time I'm going to write the form pretty quickly. Okay, so let me just use this form. Okay, then we'll be using a stack to style our input fields. Stack will be imported from material UI. Then we are going to actually use input field, okay, simple input field, and then again one more input field, and then lastly one more input field. Let me also tell you what these input field are for. First one is for first name, then second one for last name, and this is for age of the user. Okay, let me also actually write the heading or title of this form, which is going to be validation. Okay, I'm going to show you how to perform validation using React hook form. Okay, let me also style it a little bit. Okay, don't worry about this MUI thing. If you don't know it, I'll be creating a lecture on it very shortly. Okay, so you can get clarity in that video. Now again we are going to first of all create a basic form. Okay, so as I just showed you, we are going to get register and handle submit, and this will be extracted from result of calling use form, and use form is going to come from React hook form, right? Then let's actually create our handle on submit function. So I'm just going to write const on submit, is equal to, then we'll get data of this form over here. Let's all actually console log it. So I'll just write console.log and then that data, right? Then inside this form again we are going to do that logic on submit, and then it's going to call handle submit first of all, which will do the validation task. When the validation succeed, then this on submit function that we have created will be called with the data of this form. Okay, then at the last, let's also not forget the submit button. So for that, again I'm going to write a comment over here, submit button. Then I'll just use this input. I'll right here type is equal to submit. So this is just a very simple form. Okay, now let's also register these fields. So I'm just going to call this register with the key name. So this first field will be called first name. So I'm just going to call it first name like this. Then similarly second input is for last name, and this one is for age. I'm just going to quickly update it, first name, last name and age. Okay, so now this is actually pretty much done. Okay, we are just going to go inside this index.js file. Again I'll be adding export statement. Okay, so I'll just write here export default as validation from validation, right? Then inside our app.js, okay, we are going to just create one new grid item. Okay, and then inside the content I'll be using validation from components. You can see it is auto imported over here. Now inside this validation, as you can see, we have these three input fields. Okay, let's now see how it's looking on our UI. Okay, so this is actually looking like this currently. Okay, I'm just going to clear the console for now. Then let's also not forget the spacing. So I'll just give a spacing of 2 over here. Yeah, so this improved look a little bit. Then the main thing over here is to add validation, because right now what we are going to do is just type your first name, last name and age. Okay, and submit this form. Then you see this data over here. Okay, but what we really want is we want to implement some validation rules on these input fields. And how we can do that? In order to do that, we just need to pass an object inside this register function. Okay, so after the key name you can actually pass validation rules inside this object. Okay, so I'm just going to make it required. So just pass required and then true like this. Okay, so this is one validation that we can do. Like if some field is required, then you can mark it as required true. Okay, then in the last name, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to actually implement a pattern. Okay, and what I mean by pattern, let me actually write it. Okay, then you will understand it. So we are actually going to write a regular expression over here. So this is going to be the code for regular expression. So we have implemented this pattern, which is actually going to impose a rule on this last name field that it can only be alphabet. Okay, it can only consist of alphabet. It cannot have any number or any special character in it, right? Let's also add one more validation rule on first name, and that will be max length. So I'm just going to specify that the max length of first name can be 20. Okay, then similarly we can also impose some validation rule on this age. Okay, so here I'm just going to write that min age can be 18 and maximum age can be 99. Okay, so these are some of the validation rules that we have implemented over here. But one question that you might get is, how do I know I have these parameters like with the name of required, max length, pattern? Okay, so how can you know if there is something like this? You can just press control and space. Okay, and you'll get a list of it. So there are few things like, as you can see over here. So these are only things that we can use to add some validations. Okay, and to understand it better, what you can do, I have this resource for you. Okay, I'll be sharing this link in the description box. Okay, you can read more about client-side form validation, which is given in very depth on this MDN web doc. Okay, and you can read what are all the inbuilt things that come, okay, with client-side form handling. Like you can pass required, min and max length, min max, okay, type, pattern, these things that we just used. Okay, but there are also some validations which are not inbuilt. Okay, and we'll be seeing shortly how to implement those custom validation. So this is a great resource for learning. Okay, and I'll be sharing it in the description box. So now after implementing all these rules, I have just saved this. Okay, now if I just remove this, okay, and type some number here, okay, then if I'm going to just submit, before that I'll be clearing my console, then you'll be able to see that nothing is going to get console logged. Okay, and the reason behind that is because this form is not passing the validation rules. Okay, because we have imposed a rule that this last name should only be alphabet. Okay, this can only consist of alphabet. Now if I just type any random alphabet, then this form will be submitted successfully and you will see this value. So now I hope you are getting the flow, okay, how it is actually rendering. We click this button, okay, then this handle submit is getting called first, and the job of this handle submit is to first validate the form. Only if form validation is passed, then this on submit is called with the data, okay, that you are seeing in the console. So this is how we can implement some inbuilt validations on our form using React. Okay, so now you might get this thing in mind, like there is some limitation, okay, around here. Like we are not able to denote to the user that this field is for entering the user's first name and this is for last name, this is for age. Actually this is not the limitation of React Hook form. We can fix it, okay, and let me show you how. So I'm just going to create a new component over here, and I'm just going to call it custom. Okay, and why I'm calling it custom? Because I'm going to create custom input components. Okay, and then we'll be registering those custom input component and linking it to the React Hook form. So let's see how we can do that. So here I'm just going to create first of all our input component. Okay, this will be our custom component. For now I'm not going to pass any props over here. Okay, just simple input component. Then inside this React fragment I'm going to just pass two things. First one will be label. Okay, this label can be used to show some heading for the input field. Okay, so we'll actually get this label as a prop. Then after that we'll be getting our input field. Okay, then to register this input field we'll be getting that register function as a prop over here. Okay, so we can just call that register function with the key name for this field, like whatever the label will be. Okay, and then we can just destructure it over here, and if it is required then we can just pass this property. Okay, and we can get the same in its prop like this. Okay, so this is our custom input component, okay, in which we have basically implemented this label. Similarly we are also going to implement select. Okay, so let me just write here const select is equal to, and here we are going to actually do something different. Okay, so let me show you. We are going to actually make use of forward ref. Okay, so first of all we are going to get this React, okay, and then forward ref on it. Then we are just going to pass a callback inside it, and we are going to actually return some JSX inside this. Okay, similarly here we are also going to return some JSX which is going to contain some label and a select field. Okay, so a select input component, this s should be small. Okay, like this. And then just two options, so I'm just going to use this option field. Okay, and the value will be 20 and the second value can be 30. Okay, here we can just use this value attribute 30 and value 20. Okay, now in order to make this select, now in order to register this select, we can actually pass the reference over here. Okay, and that reference is actually going to be available from this arguments. Okay, so here we are going to get this on change and on blur like this. Okay, let's also import this React. Now let's actually create our custom form component, okay, and use these two fields that we have created. So I'll just create a functional component with the name of custom form, and then as usual I'm going to get register and handle submit as a result of calling use form. Okay, so when we call this use form, we are actually going to get an object, and we can destructure these two fields, register and handle submit, out of it. Then we can just create our on submit function, okay, as I showed you in the other two components. So here is our on submit function. It is going to get this data, okay, which is the form data actually, and we can just again console log it. Okay, or if you want to see the data in alert, we can also do that. So here I'm just going to write alert, okay, and we can just json.stringify it. Okay, then let's actually return JSX, in which we are going to make use of these two custom components. Okay, so here I'm just going to return some JSX, again simple form, okay, like this simple form, and then inside this form as usual we'll be passing on submit. This on submit is going to get handle submit, which will be triggering the validation rules. Then after passing the validation rules, we are going to call this on submit that we created over here with the data, form data, right? Inside this form we have to, let's actually style it first. Okay, we can use stack from material UI. Okay, then let's actually give it some spacing. I'm going to give it a spacing of 2. Then inside this, first of all I'm just going to give a submit button. Okay, so for that I can just use again this input with type submit like this. Okay, and then the next thing is, which is actually very interesting, is to see how we are going to make use of this input and select, okay, and register these two. Input, it is actually very simple. We are just going to pass these three things, okay, as prop. So let's implement that. We can just write input here, okay, and please pay attention that this I is capital over here because it is our custom component, not from that HTML. Okay, then we'll be passing those three things as props. So label will be first name. Okay, we want the user to enter their first name. We can actually pass this register over here. Okay, register as register, and then required. Okay, and if we are not going to pass any value for this required prop, then that means it's a boolean prop. Okay, and by default for any boolean prop in React, its value is always true, okay, when we are passing it as a prop. Then after this, let's actually see what we are going to do with this select component. Now as you see in this select component, we are actually going to pass these things as props, okay, but we don't have any idea about how to get this on change, on blur, okay, and how to get this ref and what this ref is actually doing. So let me tell you that when we are actually destructuring this register, okay, with this label over here, then what it's doing, it's actually passing this on change, on blur, ref, okay, name, all these things inside this input as prop. Okay, and here we are actually getting these as prop on this parent component. That means we have to call register right here. Okay, so that is why I'm just going to call this register and then destructure it. Label will be age. Okay, then we also need to pass label. Okay, this label is actually not a part of this register, so we have to pass it individually. I'm just going to give it a label of age. Then we can just format it, okay, save it. You can just, now the last step is to export it. So we are going to write export default custom form. like this. Okay, let me correct this spelling. Then we can save it and go to index.js. Then inside here you can just repeat this line over here like this. Okay, and then what we can do, we can just call it custom form. Okay, and we can import it from custom. Right now, just like we did with this validation, again we are going to go inside this app.js component. Okay, then I'll be adding one more grid item, and inside that grid item, in place of this content, I am going to render custom form. Okay, let's now see what we get on our screen. And as you can see, in this form we are only getting this age input component. Okay, and we are not getting that first name. Let's actually debug this form. Okay, so if you go into this input component, then you can see we have not added that return keyword over here. Okay, so that is missing. Now after adding that return keyword, I'm just again going to save it. Okay, then this time we also have this first name input field over here. Okay, so let's now actually see if this form is working as expected or not. Okay, I'm just going to write my first name and age. Okay, my age is 23. That is not in the given option, so I'm just going to select the higher one. Okay, so now if I submit it, you can see we are getting this age 20 and first name Shreyans. Okay, so that means our form is working as expected, but this time around we have used our custom input component instead of just simple input component. Okay, now there are other things that we can also do, like using input components from external libraries like Material UI, React Select. Okay, then we can also add some complex validation. Okay, so we are actually going to discuss all those things and also how to handle errors gracefully using React Hook form in the next part. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Okay, and you are as excited as me for the next part. Okay, which is going to be released tomorrow. So thank you for watching this video, and also please make sure to like this video and also leave your comment down below. That is going to help us to grow this channel. And also you can join our Discord channel, and please also give this repo a star on GitHub. So that's it for today. I'll see you in the next one.